Of course, we will start with the define phase. The purpose of the define phase is to define a critical output, identify the important unfulfilled requirements, describe its problems, evaluate their monetary business relevance, and define the targets, the scope, and the team for the project. When I started my Six Sigma training in the 90s, nobody really cared about the suitability of project topics. We received a topic from the management and had often enough to realize that it was not suitable for Six Sigma. Of course, you can almost always use the one or the other tool of the DMIC, but a Six Sigma project requires at least the use of the basic Six Sigma tools in their logical order, as we will do here. I wasted a lot of time on unsuitable projects, and I have the impression I'm an expert on Six Sigma dead ends and project abysses. Therefore, I developed the tools project topic and project definition. They allow to involve every employee of a company in the identification of a suitable project. Thus, at first, we will identify and define a new Six Sigma project with the tools project topic and project definition. Then we will delimitate and structure the application area of the project in the SIPOC. We will listen to the customer and the responsible manager, filter their complaints and requirements, prioritize the problems, and identify problems that are critical to quality. At least we will define the scope of the project, define its targets, build the team and agree these conditions in a project charter. For the project topic, we have to identify a weakness in a process and/or a deviation in a product or service, evaluate its relevance for the company, and check the suitability for Six Sigma. Then we will specify the problems, identify the underlying process, and evaluate the effects of the problems on the customer and on the business initially from our perspective. In the SIPOC, we will delimitate the area of the project by determining the first input and the last output of the process. Then we will identify all important intermediate outputs of the process within the determined area, as well as the underlying core process steps and their important inputs. At least we will identify the related internal or external supplier of the inputs and the internal or external customer of the outputs. I combined the tools Voice of Customer, Voice of Business, the identification of critical requirements, the Kano model and the CTQs in one tool and called it Voice to Criticals. We start by interviewing customer and manager about their needs and complaints on the product or service. Then we translate the complaints into critical requirements for the attributes of the product or service. Next, we assign the critical attributes to the categories quality, availability, or consumption, and thus determine the type of the problem. At least we evaluate the importance of the requirements according to the Kano model and determine the degree of their fulfillment, resulting in the CTQs, critical to quality. In the project charter, we will summarize the relevance of the project for the customer and the company in a business case. We also summarize information about the process, its important outputs and their problems, agree on the targets for the important requirements, and on the scope of the project. Now the necessary team can be assembled with a sponsor and a responsible manager of the process, which is often the same person, a green or black belt, the necessary experts, and a person from the controlling department who ultimately reviews the benefits of the project. All important problems are now defined and a contract on the project is agreed. After define, we can go to the measure phase to identify the influences on the problems, develop related hypotheses, and a data collection plan.